How's it going, everybody? I want to welcome you guys to the mini VMware host specific course that I wanted to put together. This course is going to be several videos in length that are going to cover all the things around VMware vSphere, around data center virtualization. So this is kind of like a precursor to a very large vCenter rollout, where this caters to more the consumer that doesn't need a very large VMware rollout, 10, 15, 20 hosts. I've worked with not a ton of customers that are very small, but a handful that are small that don't need vCenter server. So in the polar opposite of using vCenter is not using vCenter, right? So they go through, they use a couple of ES6i hosts, they manage them individually. And we're going to be going through several designs around that. So because of the fact that there are customers out there that, and users that support those environments, pardon me, I decided to go ahead and create some content around just host-specific configurations and how you can interact with the host in a variety of different manners, and local storage and stuff like that. Basically, I rebuilt my home lab in a virtual environment just to demonstrate to you guys what all that looks like. Now, I want to give you guys a quick tour of my virtual lab environment, just so that if anybody wants to basically try to replicate what I'm doing at home, you can feel free to do so. I feel like it's one of those things where it's super easy to do, and, well, I guess not super easy might be an over exaggeration, but basically it's not difficult to do if you've had a little bit of experience with VMware. If you're brand new to it, I cut right to the chase, right? I don't sit there and waste around. I don't do a bunch of PowerPoint presentations. I'm more like, hey, this is what this particular feature does, and this is how to go configure it. Go boom. So yeah, not going to waste your time diving into something specific. The videos will be edited to cut out any of the, wasting time waiting for something to load. That all stuff will be edited out for your viewing pleasure. It's to the point, get you in, get you out, and on your way. I don't know exactly how many videos it'll be right at this point in time. I'm guessing around 10, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. But you'll know when you go and you see, the numerical identification of what video you're on. So with that being said, let's go ahead, and I want to give you kind of a high-level breakdown as to where we are at. So let me go ahead and minimize workstation. So this is a Cisco UCS C220 server, right? It's the one I'm remote desktoped into. I've got Windows Server 2016 installed on it, and it is the base operating system. Now, you might ask, well, why are you, what was the methodology for that? Well, I normally wouldn't use a server OS to demonstrate things like this. I would normally use a desktop OS. But when I tried to install Windows 7 and Windows 10, the 500 gig virtual drive that you create when you bring up a Cisco UCS server, the virtual drive, or the VD, wasn't being recognized by the desktop operating systems that I was trying to boot the server to. And so I was like, well, I wonder if I do server, if that would make a difference. And as soon as I launched Server 2016, it popped right up. I could see the virtual drive. I'm like, oh, okay, we're going Server 2016 then. And so I proceeded down the path. And as you can see, it's a very minimal installation. I don't have a whole lot going on here because the whole point isn't the server itself, it's the things you can run on top of it. And I want to give you guys a couple of specific bits of information in terms of what's actually going on here. So if I right click on here and go to Device Manager, and if I also click on here and go to this PC, and I go to Computer and then System Properties, I want to give you kind of an overarching view as to what the server is. Now, the underlying hardware, Cisco UCS C220 M3S, and that information will be in the description below. It's got two CPUs in it, and each one of the CPUs is an 8-core, which gives me a total of, let me go ahead and pop back in. So each CPU has 8 physical cores, so that means a total of 2 CPUs gives me 16 total cores. Then you add in hyperthreading, it gives me 32 cores. Okay, so I have lots of compute capability here. I also ordered it off of eBay with 256 gigs of RAM. As a matter of fact, let me go ahead and see if I can't pull up that eBay listing real quick. eBay.com. Let me go ahead to Cisco UCS. Go ahead and pull this listing off. Let's see. I'm actually go to my account and go to my purchase history. This guy right here. I don't know how long these guys will be in play for, but this is basically what it is that I bought. This is the server that I bought. So it's Cisco UCS C220 M3S with two 8-core CPUs, E5-2650, 256 gigs of RAM, and two 300 gig drives. That's what I went out and bought. I paid $750 for it. Guess what? It's probably one of the best decisions I ever made. And you might ask, well, why did you go? Why did you buy another server? You just bought one not too long ago. Well, it was a little over a year ago, and that was another C220 M3S. And the reason why I'm doing that is because the IBM servers that I've had for forever, their CPUs are just older, and the newer, I could not get ESXi 6.7 to boot on that server because of the fact that it's so old. The CPU is just too old. And basically, all that VMware does is when ESXi does a check to see if they can actually boot off of that CPU, it has a number of, a CPU has a hexadecimal value that it checks. And it says, okay, I'm going to accept everything from 0000 through 00FF. All those will be good. If you're outside of that range, it's, you're done. So it's kind of it's basically like that. And so 6.7 was checked, and it was just not going to work. I'm like, aw. So then I went online, found some servers that I could buy, and $700 for what I got I think is a steal. I also looked it up on CGW and some other vendors, and that's like a $4,000 to $7,000 server. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go with the one off of eBay. It came a few days later, and great work. So let me talk just a little bit about some of the issues I ran into. And actually, let me go ahead and pull up the CIMC and show you what I'm talking about here before we dive into any of these specifics. Because the details that when I was playing around with it trying to get it to work, there were some legit specific issues. And let me go ahead and bring this over real quick. This is the CIMC, so I'll talk about this a little bit more in detail. Basically what ended up happening was when I went to go get it up and running, there were some specifics with not being able to get the KVM console to work. Let me go ahead and click on here, and I'm going to go click on allow. This will allow me to log in. So let me go ahead and log in real quick and type in the password that I defined. We'll be able to log into the CIMC. So you might ask, what's the CIMC? The CIMC is going to be the out-of-band connection. So there's actually 3 NICs on the server. One of which is for management, which is what I'm logging into now. In the event that you can't access the operating system NIC from the data plane, I can access an out-of-band connection. And what ended up happening was, originally when this guy came in, this guy right here, this firmware version on the CIMC, was down to 1.4, I think. 1.4 and change. And I could not get the Windows Server to boot at all. It just would not boot because it had secure boot enabled, and I had to turn that off. So after quite a bit of Googling, I eventually figured out that I had to download a firmware. And the firmware, you normally, this is how I went about doing it. I went to admin and firmware management, and I tried uploading the firmware this way, and it wasn't taking it. I was like, what the heck? So I ended up having to go through and figure out how to do that. So it kept on telling me you need to log into the KVM console. I'm like, okay. Well, I click on it, and it said it wasn't supported. So I have a Windows 7 VM running, and I've already got all the necessary Flash images installed on it because of other Flash issues that I ran into. So I was able to log into that, get Flash to work on it, and then I was able to pull up the KVM console. I kept on getting this error right here. If you click on OK, you're going to get this little pop-up. We keep it, and then we're going to go ahead and look at the viewer, and we get this little pop-up right here, which is pretty standard. And if you remember, we're on Cisco's ASDM, you get the same pop-up. So we're going to go ahead and run that. And now we'll get this one right here, and we're going to go ahead and continue, and then we get this guy right here. So this is the KVM console. So this would be no different than if you had a physical keyboard plugged into the back of the server, and if you had the a VGA cable plugged into the back. No different than this. But the problem was I couldn't get the server to look the way that I wanted it to. You know, I wasn't able to do the things that I want. So I had to reboot the server through the CIMC. And when I rebooted it, the virtual media popped up, and it's actually like a boot option. And when you see it pop open, when you see the server boot initially, it'll get through like the CIMC console or the configurations where you do setup, where you press F2 or F8 or F12 or whatever. So I pressed F6 for the boot menu, and then as soon as I did that, I was able to drop down to the DVD media, where I had downloaded that firmware ISO that I was able to get downloaded from Cisco. I pointed to that. I gave it took about an hour, and then after it was done, I rebooted, and then everything was happy, and then the install updated, and everything was hunky-dory. Then all of a sudden my capabilities came up, and then my storage, I now have my virtual drive info. I've got a 500 gig hard drive. Basically, it's two 300 gig drives, and if I go back to server, and I go to BIOS. No. Well, this gets me changes. Oh, that's another thing I want to point out too. I was installing Server 2016, not the eval version, the actual, like, if you have Microsoft licensing, you download a separate ISO file for that, because the license that I used is tied to Microsoft licensing, but an eval version, migrating from an eval version to a licensed version, the license that I have doesn't tack onto that. So I had to go in and download the ISO from Microsoft that I needed, and then when I went through that process, I was able to go into the configured boot order, and I originally had USB above hard drive, and then when I went through the Server 2016 install, I got through all that rigmarole, and then it rebooted into the USB hard drive. I'm like, oh, that's not what I want. So I rebooted again, modified the boot order to do the USB as a secondary and hard drive as the primary, and then it booted right up. And that was the extent of my issues, and obviously Windows updates and things like that, but that's basically where that comes into play. I'm talking about this stuff only because the fact that if you run into problems, I want to try to give you guys a couple of ideas in order to try to resolve those issues. So once I got done with that, I was a happy camper. Beyond that, there is a couple of other things that I'm going to go ahead and talk about. So let me go ahead and jump out of the way real quick. And so let me go ahead and get rid of the CIMC and get rid of the console cable. Back on the server itself, I went and I downloaded, actually before I go any further, the server itself, 256 gigs of RAM. It's got 2 physical CPUs, which gives me a total of 32 logical cores. If I expand processors right here, I have processors for days. And if you have this guy open, it'll tell you that you have 2 sockets, 16 cores, which gives you 2 times 16 gives you 32 logical processors, which is nice to have. Right now I'm sitting at about 3% utilization and about almost 60 gigs of RAM. And then if I look, if I close this out and I close this out, first thing I did was obviously install Google Chrome and Firefox and VMware Workstation Pro. If I click on Workstation Pro and I go to Home, it's an eval copy. Out of the gate, you can get an eval copy, and you have plenty of time to play with that and get that up and running. So 30 days is pretty good time stretch for most testing. I'm going to license this here in the future through my VMUG access. I'll license it. The very first computer that I installed was this Windows 10 box. This gives me a Windows 10 Enterprise eval, and this gives me the ability of playing around with this stuff, and I have a device to do everything that I need to have with it. And then the next thing that I did is I installed DC1. DC1 is Server 2012 R2, and this is my domain controller. So when I go in and I play around with the configuration, I'm able to get everything up and running the way that I need it to. So I have all my DNS entries in here and all that type of stuff ready to roll. So this Windows 10 box is actually not part of the domain. As you can see here, if I was to go to here, I'm sorry, this one is. Never mind. I kept on thinking I was talking about this one here. Here I'm just logged in as administrator, and I have a password set for it. But on this guy here, if I go to this PC and then I go to computer and then system properties, if I go down to the bottom here, this doesn't tell me what I want to see. Let me go to computer and then manage. It's one of those two. Anyway, it'll tell you that you're part of a no, that's not it. Let me go back to control panel. Open that up, and then we'll go to system and security, and then we're going to go to system. Here, so I'm admin at lab.local. This is my domain information right here, so that this PC is domain connected to the network, and from there I'm using it to manage all of these ESXi hosts over here. I started off with 6.0 and 6.2. So 6.0 here, I got 2 hosts of each version of ESXi, so I can play around with the different things and get everything up and running, and I can have dual hosts. All that stuff is working out quite well. Then I have 6.5 and 6.7 deployed. Now if I go back over here to Windows 10 and I close out these guys real quick, and I go back over here to here, I have this particular ESXi host is logged in, and I have a server deployed to it. I also have a storage area network set up. I have a SAN through iSCSI. I'll talk about that here more in just a moment. But I have that squared away. Then inside of Firefox, I have 2 ESXi 6.5 hosts, because for whatever reason, when you log into 6.5 with Chrome, it doesn't like it. It might be just specifically, it's not a ESXi issue, it's a Chrome not being able to interact with the UI of the host itself. And then if I come over here to Chrome, I have 2 ESXi 6.7 hosts deployed. So all's well there. Now I have my 6 hosts, and then I have FreeNAS. Now one thing that I want to preface here is initially when I do my demos, I'll be talking about the networking and all that type of stuff that goes into play and how all that stuff works. And then we, upload an operating system to the local storage of a couple of ESXi hosts. We deploy some VMs, we do some connectivity tests, and then I move over to remote storage. So I deploy FreeNAS, I get all the networking up and running and operational, I get the IP addressing squared away, and then we dive into the deploying some VMs through remote storage. So it would be if you had if you had deployed a storage appliance in your lab or in your environment, and you connect it to your ESXi host for shared storage. So you upload whatever files you need to the storage appliance once, and then all your hosts can share that storage, which is kind of nice. So that's what I did with the multiple servers. That I also show you the virtual machine remote console, and a bunch of other stuff that goes along with that. VMware tools installs, all that good stuff. So then I go in and I add Active Directory authentication to the hosts. So that being said, that's basically everything that we talk about in our lab. It's several videos long. It goes into a lot of the specifics that an environment that doesn't need vCenter would use. So now I'm going to pivot, and I'm going to deploy 6.7 vCenter. I'm going to deploy both the vCenter server appliance as well as the Windows version, and I'm going to shut down. I'm going to upgrade one of these ESXi 6.0 hosts to 6.5 and then to 6.7, and I'll walk you guys through that process, because now we're at that point where we need to do the upgrades. And then I'm also going to upgrade one of these 6.5 hosts to 6.7, and then the other 2 hosts will get shut down. So we'll have a total of 4 ESXi servers that we're going to be joining to, well, maybe not. I haven't decided yet. But I still have a lot of RAM left over. I haven't even tapped the first half. I'm like a quarter usage on RAM, not even. So I could deploy a few more devices and then have more scalability. The other thing that I'm going to do RAM-wise and CPU is I'm actually going to bump up the utilization of the ESXi hosts. I'm going to bump up their CPU utilization and their RAM capacity. So instead of having 4 vCPUs, I might bump that up to 8 on each one, or 6, and then instead of being 16 gigs of RAM, I'll give it like 24 or 32. So if there's 64, 128, 192, yeah, so it should have more than enough capacity to do what I need to do, and that will give me the flexibility of playing around with this and really like pulling back the covers and diving into VMware and getting all that stuff done. So that's pretty much my plan, and we're going to need to deploy vCenter and get all that type of stuff working, and I'll be releasing content on that as we go along. So keep your eyes open for content as it comes out in the near future. And until next time, guys, thanks so much for stopping by, and we'll catch you guys in the next video. Actually, hold the phone, not ready yet. I have a network attached storage here through FreeNAS. It's actually a really good little product here that I've been playing with here on FreeNAS on the console. Everything's working out pretty well. Once it gets installed, I show you how to install this and deal with all the configuration bits and get the iSCSI process up and running. It's pretty simple, and then that allows all of these hosts. For example, right here on this guy, I have SAN 1 deployed. If I right click here and go browse data store, there are several servers deployed, plus I deployed Windows Server 2012 R2. That just goes to show you the how remote storage comes into play and all that good stuff that goes along with that. So that's pretty much what I wanted to cover in this video. Thanks so much again for hanging out with me, and until next time, guys, take it easy.